Namaste and welcome to the second episode of Shadow Strategist. Today on Engineers Day, we are having some very interesting discussions. Last episode, we walked you through about who Xi Jinping was, what his background before getting into politics was, what his aspirations as a politician was, how as a leader he has been engineering his vision, his plan for the entire country, right? We'll get down a little more into understanding the engineering of China. Do you all know what China was in 1941? Right? Around the same time that the World War II was just about beginning to happen, India was on the throes of getting independence. Now visualize what China was. We all have a picture of China when we look at the maps today, right? Or maybe a few years ago, while most of us were still in schools and colleges and getting out, right? Remember that nice big fat duck blob, right? और हम समझते थे यही है dragon, इसके अंदर में coil होकर रहती है China and all that. In 1941, it was a tiny strip of land, landlocked piece of land, no access to the seas, right? Just something in the middle. How many of us know where the Great Wall of China was, or where China is? That was the outer limit of China. The Great Wall was, after all, built to keep non-Chinese out of China, right? Now, when you look at the map of China, you will see that I'm thinking right in the center of China, right? Beyond 1941, what has happened is that China expanded beyond the Great Wall of China. The part to the northeast above Korea was a piece of land called as Manchuria. Correct. Chili Manchurian, Gobi Manchurian, same Manchuria. That part was annexed. It belonged to Japan at the end of the World War II. It was slowly merged in. No war, no gunshot, salami slicing, the great chopstick pick away from China. Mongolia was a large piece of land. That's why they had the Great Wall of China, so that to keep the Huns or Mongols out, right? What is known as Outer Mongolia was sliced away. What the Mongolia that we know today, the tiny thing, the shape of a momo, was very, very different. That was sliced away and acquired. To the east of what is China now is a piece of land which is known as East Turkmenistan. That was taken away. It is known as the Xinjiang province. Towards the southeast corner, north of where Vietnam or Cambodia is, was a piece of land known as Sichuan. That was sliced away. Part of it got sliced away because of Mao's long march. And then we all know the story of Tibet, right? A huge chunk of China, arguably about a third of the landmass of China, was annexed forcibly, kept well within wraps, nobody knew, the great communist machinery of complete silence, right? So the China that we see today is a large piece of illegal entity. What has happened under Xi Jinping is that he started believing this delusionary existence and thought that we can expand it beyond that. So he pushed the envelope further away into the South China Sea, started having aspirations on land or islands occupied by Philippines, by Vietnam, by Cambodia, right up to the Malacca states. He started having claims on that. Plus the economic offensive, or we will call it an economic offensive, whatever the Chinese want to call it, right? BRO, or, whatever they want to call that. It is actually a Chinese economic offensive. What we have today is Chinese land in Djibouti, Gwadar. They were aspiring for Hambantota. India checkmated. They were aspiring for Maldives yesterday, right? Maldives signed an accord with the US in consultation and with complete support of India to push out to China. The same Maldives, which till 2 years ago under another president almost sold themselves off to China, right? Incurred huge debts. India had to bail them off. India paid the equivalent of 2 billion to Maldives so that they keep their bone, flesh and skin together. And now they are signed up with US for protection with India's support. Now there's a nice consolidation of people against the hegemony of Xi Jinping. This China It's not the China that even the Chinese want to believe. This is Xi Jinping's China, and it's a nasty, rolling, like a caterpillar eating away at a plant. You have no clue what's happening. You wake up in the morning and you see your favorite rose or dahlia isn't there anymore. It's been gnawed away at night. That's what the Chinese have been doing for the rest of the world. Why are we discussing all this today, right? Why? What does this mean to us? The entire game for China is in acquiring two things: land, water. Understand one thing: about 60% of China is starved of water. The only source of water that they can access is the meltwater from Himalaya. Now understand one thing: the Chinese contribute nothing, absolutely nothing, for nature conservation. Not a single forestation efforts run there, no water harvesting runs there. You haven't ever, I mean, of course, you would come across some bullshit story from Global Times about some jiggery pokery stuff that they're doing here or there. Take it with a fist of salt. It isn't true, right? What they therefore want is access to the Himalayan meltwater, which is the reason that they keep encroaching beyond the Himalayas towards India. Will they be happy with the meltwater, or would they eye the plains and all that? Separate story. What they need to understand is that Himalaya is a formidable defense that India has, number one. But even bigger than the Himalayas is the resolve of Indians to push back the nasty slant eyes from even eyeing at what India is. In the current dispensation, they have somebody who can actually look these guys in their eye and say, enough is enough, one more step, and you risk blowing off your leg. So that's one risk that Xi Jinping is. Coming back to the second point why we are discussing this. They have been salami slicing. You had the defense minister discuss today in the parliament about how, thousands of square kilometers of land were sliced away by China over the years since our independence, right? Some we knew, some we didn't know because we were too haphazard, too unorganized to keep an eye on saying what's happening in every square inch of land that was assigned to us. Once in a while, some honest person would look up and say, "Oops, we used to own that land. How come the Chinese trucks are running there? How come they build a road on our land?" And then, in the so-called interest of tranquility and peace, we would wish it away and say it's okay. We also had a very nice Pandit, Chacha, Uncle, Romeo of a Prime Minister who said, nothing grows there, so let them have it, it doesn't matter types. Moral of the story, 38,000 square kilometers of land has been sliced away, no more. What in all likelihood is going to happen is that if China were to push its envelope, and if Xi Jinping were to try his luck, push his luck a bit too much with India, you'd probably go back to pre-1941 China. In all likelihood, what would happen is independence for Tibet would gain momentum, Hong Kong and Macau would separate, Taiwan anyway is the real Republic of China. I mean, understand one thing, when the communists came in, the real Chinese, moved and took refuge in Taiwan. Taiwan is the real China, by the way. This is communist China. So Taiwan will, of course, argue very strongly for its independence. If they push their envelope, 5 years, mark my words, we'll see a very different map of the world. One thing that India can do, must do, is change the theaters, make it really exciting for Toy Boy with his remote control planes and his video warriors to start and play a very different game of global strategy. What if India were to make the shipping lanes around the Indian Ocean very difficult for the Chinese to maneuver? All we need to do is intercept every single Chinese flag carrier, inspect them, essentially slow their transport through the Indian Ocean by 2 or 3 days. See the music that does to the economy there. That will provoke an action. The land between, the Himalayas and the Indian Ocean, which is who we are. You mess with the Himalayas, we choke you in the ocean. Let's see what the Chinese does then. This is one aspect that I'm sure the strategists around the world are are working around. That is the genesis behind what the trad is all about. Why Japan, India, Australia, the United States, and now a lot of other Indian Ocean Rim countries are gearing towards and coming together to say, how do we defend ourselves to a pesky neighbor who, you know, the little locust who tries to believe that he's a fire-breathing dragon. How do we check and counter him and hurt him where it really makes him wins? Understand the single biggest frailty of the Chinese system now. Over the last 5, 7, 12 years, they have been doling out money by the billions, right, to a lot of nations with the hope that they can pull the string in and choke them. Guess what? If all of them were to stand up and say, F off China, we aren't paying back, it will take out the banking system of China. Whatever passes off as the banking system of China will be done, will be finished, right? If that is done, the untold story that's happening within China since the Wuhan virus happened, the untold story is this massive resentment building up against the state machinery, against the army. Every honest, intelligent Chinese national knows that everything that's happening now with India, with Taiwan, with Cambodia, everything that's happening now is a distraction. Distraction by a failed leader whose gambit with the Wuhan virus went horribly wrong. So this is a gambit of a failed leader trying to divert attention from a huge internal turmoil that is building up. Chinese have gotten very used to a certain way of life. All that is gone. They have two choices: follow Xi Jinping's story, going back to the farmland, or kick him out and get a system which is more amenable to listening to people and working towards them. That is what Xi Jinping really fears. That is also what the world fears. Because remember what we said last time, the madman's gambit. To save himself, he would do the ancient American cowboy thing of going down under a hail of bullets. That's what we want. Like a true despot, he doesn't care if he takes on a few thousand or a million people along with him. But he would play a nasty last game. Unfortunately, most of us, in India for sure, and our partner countries will also get drawn into the conflict. What will probably happen is that parts of China, which was wrongly annexed many years ago, will probably get corrected, right? Manchuria would probably, emerge as an independent nation, which is good because it's right next to the Koreas. Koreas would probably get drawn into, North Korea at least would get drawn in. If North is drawn in, the South gets drawn in. That will resolve the Korea conflict. With China down, the last remaining bastion of communism goes, and that madman Kim would also get accounted for, and that would lead to a natural amalgamation of the Korean peninsula as one independent nation, which is what it always should have been. So the Koreas would become one, Manchuria would be an independent place, Mongolia would get merged to what Mongolia is supposed to be, that Inner Mongolia, Outer Mongolia will all together be one big Mongol nation. East Turkmenistan would become Xinjiang, which would be a separate nation and stand for itself. The Dalai Lama would have his, a country that he actually leads, and he can operate from where, he is the leader of, which is in Tibet. That would leave southeastern part of Sichuan. That would separate itself. In all likelihood, it would become one of the most industrial and a country to reckon with in Southeast Asia. Good, because that gives a nice diversity to Southeast Asia. This is the likely scenario if madman Jinping plays his last gambit. Will he? Won't he? Anybody's guess. In all likelihood, he will, because the other alternative is to either have a heart attack or a cerebral stroke and fade away and let someone else handle it, because it's a face issue, right? Or march in with all guns blazing, get beaten up black and blue, but take out a few million people in the process and exact a high price for it. We'll come back next week and discuss a little more on what is the strategic imperatives that the rest of the nations have to counter China and stop it before it leads to world War III. We had a Hitler, we don't need a Schickler. Thank you.